When you walk into Independence Village of Waterstone, one of the first things that catches your eye is the display of veterans along the walls. Veterans of all our recent major conflicts. Some really interesting and exciting stories. Stay with us on My Life to hear more. We're pleased to be here at Independence Village in Oxford with Florence Hill. Florence Hill is a retired registered nurse anesthetist, among other things, diving out of airplanes, serving in World War II, roaring her way through the Grand Canyon. You've done almost everything, Florence.
10 days we were in that.
10 days.
Yeah. Slept any place that we got on the shore, you know. It was desert down in the bottom of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah. Let's go back to the nursing school days and to just when you were about to get out of nursing school. Had World War II started yet at that time?
Yeah. I got out in 42 and this started in 41.
And what were you thinking of then with the war going on?
Well, making a few dollars because I wanted to buy a car. And then I was getting pressured by my husband. He wanted to get married, wanted to get married after high school, and I said, no go.
So did you meet him during high school?
High school, in high
okay, so you were dating through nursing school.
Kinda. You didn't get out much. You had to study till 8 o'clock, and then you could go out till 10 o'clock, except once a month you'd get what they called a late leave. That was 12 o'clock. However, if they'd found anything wrong, late for class or anything, you lost your late leave, so you didn't get too many.
Right. So was that a tough romance to keep going?
Well, I tried to quit him a few times, and when I'd go out to my grandmother's, he was there playing Purchisa with her. And when I'd go home to my folks, he was there for Sunday dinner, so I had an awful time. I had a few other dates, but...
So finally it was easier just to marry the guy, huh?
Yeah, really.
And when did that happen?
Oh, dear.
After nursing school?
1943.
And you got out of nursing school when?
42.
Right, so about a year after nursing school you got
Yeah.
married. And during that time, where were you at as far as being involved in the war and stuff?
Well, I had said, now I'm going to go volunteer. And he said, well, okay. And I said, now I want to travel. And he said, oh, we'll travel. Well, we traveled to the town and traveled maybe 50 miles. That was about it.
What was he doing? What was his job?
Well, we rented 2 farms, and then we bought a 320-acre farm and rented a few other farms. And the 2 of us did 1,100 acres. And we had a 14-year-old boy that we hired, and he helped. But when we bought the 320, that's a mile long and a half mile wide, I would go from Dryden on a tractor to north of Romeo, and then work all day, and then go back to feed the kids and put them to bed and everything.
So nursing kind of went by the wayside for a while.
Well, I had to. Yeah.
But then when did the military come into being?
Well, when he had to go and get a physical, and we thought he was going in March. And we went down, Grandma and Grandpa and George and I went to the lawyer, took him in eggs and all the things they always did. And he had left the door ajar, and Grandpa and George went in and talked to him. And Grandma and I sat out in the waiting room. And the lawyer had a big booming voice. And he said, "George, I don't know how much longer I can keep you out of the Army." I got up and kicked that door open. And I said, "What's this about keeping him out of the Army?" So they said, "None of your business." I said, "The hell it isn't." So I said, "I'm taking the day off tomorrow." I was school nurse at that time. And joining the Army, and I did.
What did your husband say about that?
What could he say? He thought he was going in March. He didn't go at all.
Because of the farm?
Well, yeah. Well, he didn't have a farm. His dad had subdivided everything off, and he'd rent 12 acres here and 20 there, and he had some machinery, so I think there was 20 tillable acres on Grandpa's place yet. Most of it was woods, though, and because he had 45 acres. But he'd subdivided most of it, you know. So George and the lawyer and what was his name? I was trying to think. He was in the House of Representatives. They kept him out. So I went.
So all of a sudden your husband had, did you have children at the time?
No.
Not at the time.
No.
So okay, so you went into the Army. Where was the first?
Nurse Corps.
Nurse Corps, Army Nurse Corps. Is that right?
In those days, you were in the men's army. There was no wax and any of that stuff. So I was the woman in the men's army.
Where were you stationed first?
Well, we had our basic at Wisconsin, Camp McCoy. It's Fort McCoy now. And then after that, we got on a train and went out to the state of Washington. And that's when we were supposed to go overseas, when the war ended. So our food was on the boat. Everything was on the boat, and we were sitting in a tent in the rain when the war ended. We were doing our bivouac, they called it. Eating K-rations, and you know, like it was the wartime. And the war ended. So I stayed another 2 or 3 months and then they let, when you were married, they didn't send you overseas until you signed that it was all right. So I signed, and guess where I was supposed to go? 2.5 years to 5 years in China. We were looking after China in those days because the Japs were in there. So I didn't go. I went back home.
But didn't you end up working in a hospital out there or something?
Oh yeah, Madigan General Hospital.
And didn't you end up caring for?
Well, Japanese were prisoners. We did that in Wisconsin. They put them as far away from the Pacific Ocean, you know.
Mm-hmm. Let's take a break right now, but I want to talk more about that when we return. Florence Hill. Back with Florence Hill. Florence, I want to talk a little bit about your time taking care of these prisoners. Do you remember any unique experiences that you had with them? I mean, it's not everybody who gets an opportunity to do this sort of thing.
The German prisoners were good workers. I had, you know, we would have like 700 fellows come in, and we had empty wards. There were 22 bed wards, there was about 22 bed wards that we had to get ready, and other places. Some were private rooms. So I called the sergeant, it was assigned me, and he signed 6 men, GIs, to come and scrub the you know, it rains a lot and things get moldy out there, so we had to fight mold. And they would scrub the bathrooms and showers and things, supposedly. And I'd look out and they were playing baseball. So I called the sergeant the second day and I said, we're not getting a damn thing done here. And he said, well, why? I said, they're out playing baseball when it wasn't raining, you know. And he said, well, they can't blame them, that's all right. I said, baloney, I've got to get these 7 wards ready. And you had to have the silverware, plates, and refrigerator, stove, everything in there. You had part of it was a place to fix meals. Well, God, I came in one day and my refrigerator was gone. Well, he sent me 3 Germans. And this good-looking German guy came in and said, reporting for duty, sir, ma'am. And he looked kind of funny. He could speak very good English. I was surprised. And the others, he told German, he'd say, time to have a break, and they'd all have cigarettes and things. But boy, he really worked those guys. And in 3 days, we had everything done. Mm-hmm. And they were beautiful.
Now, the war was over at this time, right?
No.
Or it wasn't?
Not yet, quite. But then they said we would get these prisoners. These Germans were prisoners, but they were working prisoners. And they were wonderful. And they didn't see that thing, picture. They wanted 2,500 nurses immediately. They got 20,000 in 7 days.
My goodness.
They didn't know what to do with them.
How long were you in the service?
Well, not long, because I went in the summer, and the war ended when? August in Germany, and then later on, very much later.
Yeah.
I mean, fairly soon later, we dropped the bomb.
Right.
So then they didn't know what to do with us again. We didn't even have an assignment on a mess hall. They had so many of us. Mm-hmm. They'd call and say, Mess 7 has food left over. We'll send a truck. And we all got in the back of a 4x4, I think they called them, and went to eat. And those guys would look at us. They were so upset. They thought they were getting out, you know. They'd bring us, hot food was pretty cold, and in those days, your dessert generally was an ice cream that was chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry in layers, wrapped with paper. By the time we ate our dinner, we picked up the paper and drank the ice cream.
You were in a unique situation because you were taking care of prisoners of war.
Well, in my place, a lot of them were our own men too, but I had prisoners mainly. Then I got pneumonia. That tent out there raining for a week. And I talked to one girl and she said, I was in the rain and I got a cold and I got a private room and a lot of fellows taking care of me. She said, get a cold. So I said, that's what I'll do. I got pneumonia. Well, they gave you penicillin, 2,000 units, which was nothing, every 3 hours around the clock. And our men, when the war was over, they went up skiing in the mountains, the one that was assigned the nurses' wards. So we had another man that would come and play bridge with the girls, and he was a doctor, and I was having an awful time breathing, and he said, "She's got to be in an oxygen tent." The gal said, "We're not assigned any." Well, he said, "Steal one." So they came to me, started IV, and they said, see, there was a corridor, and then all these wards out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, "See that fellow over there?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "They've sent for his folks. He won't live long. He has tuberculosis because he was in coal mines, you know, over there." And one day he died, and I got that dirty oxygen tent, never got TB. But that helped me a lot because I wasn't breathing very well.
Tell me about transitioning into civilian life. Now, your husband, he was farming at this time?
All over the place. He lived with his dad and mother, yeah.
So what were you thinking as your discharge date was approaching?
Well, they wanted to sign you up again, and I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what I was going to do. But we had, when we were assigned overseas in China, we had a leave before we went, and I got pregnant during the leave. So I was 4 or 5 months pregnant when I got out of the Army. So I was going back. We had an apartment across the street, but we had to live with Dad and Mother, and she didn't like it. Oh boy, she didn't like it. One day she said, "You know, it's silly to have women go get they don't need over 4th grade. They should learn how to take care of babies and bake bread." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry." But she didn't like me at all because I didn't just have babies and bake bread.
Well, you were ahead of your time.
Well, yeah, especially flying, you know. Because I did a lot of my first flying was on the GI plan.
Uh-huh.
And by that time, I was pregnant with a second when I was doing tailspins and things.
So when did you start learning how did that come about, learning to fly?
My aunt was in the waves, and she heard about this and was taking lessons in Birmingham, just west of Birmingham, Burrs Airfield. And she called me and she said, "You can get that on your GI plan. You don't need any more education." I said, "Oh." So I went out there and got it on my GI plan. But I couldn't finish it because I was doing tailspins. And my mother-in-law heard that and she said, "You're killing that baby. That's going to wrap the cord around its neck." And she just raised hell, so I had to quit.
Yeah. Let's take a break right now. We'll be right back with Florence Hill. Back here with Florence Hill. Florence, was it tough to combine your love of flying with farming and being a mother?
Well, yeah, it wasn't easy. But I had quit when I was doing the tailspins because I thought, you know, if that happens, and I doubted it would, I will be a murderer, she'd think. So
you stopped flying for a while.
I quit trying to get my license. And then once we bought that farm, I said, I'd like a runway on this. So we made a runway, and I went over to Romeo Flying Field, and I got my license from him. He was, in fact, he wanted me to get a commercial license, and I said, why? Women don't fly commercially. He said, they will. Well, I started it. I said, I don't want the license, because you have to go with a company and they get you out any weather and it isn't good. So I wouldn't do it, but I could have had a license for that. Wingovers, a whole lot of things we didn't do for a private license. And I would land on the farm and say, George, let me give you a ride. I don't want to fly. Well, pretty soon, when I bought that, he was in another state hauling fertilizer. He would get free fertilizer if he hauled so many.
This is your husband you're
yeah.
talking about.
So he finally decided he'd like to go over and see what was going on. Well, while he was away, I bought an airplane. I didn't dare tell him. It was $800. It wasn't much of an airplane, but we patched it up and we flew it. Anyway.
Was this your first airplane?
Yeah,
that you
the
owned?
one I bought.
Yeah, okay.
$800.
What kind was it?
It had a 65-horse Continental engine, and it was a side-by-side, and I had taken lessons in one tandem, you know. So I liked this side-by-side with the wheel better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I finished my license. But George took lessons, and I said to Frank Zakowski, don't tell him he owns an airplane. And he says it's only worth $5 an hour. I won't pay a cent more. I said, take his $5 an hour, and I'll pay the rest. Well, if you owned an airplane, they would do it. If you paid for the gas and everything, they'd do it for $5 an hour. So I figured that out. And one time he did a landing and went around in a circle. And there was springs in the back that did the tail, you know. One broke, and that made him go flipping around.
This your husband we're talking about?
Yeah.
So he ended up flying too?
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. And so he came, and Frank said, oh, don't put it in my shop. They'll charge you a lot. He said, I can buy that spring, and you can put it on yourself.
Now, you owned a couple more airplanes besides that, didn't you?
Later. I traded one and got a better one. And then I got a 4-place, 150 horsepower Lycoming engine on that one. Yeah, and I didn't like it at all. Tricycle landing gear, and I liked the old tail dragger. But I didn't like that bigger one, or that newer one.
What was your involvement in nursing at this time?
Well, I went out to the new hospital, and they weren't hiring, so I went and did private duty for 6 weeks maybe, and they decided to hire me. Well, I was in a place where you had semi-private rooms and private rooms. A new hospital, nice. In the old hospital, we had 22-bed wards. And so I didn't think I liked that too well. It paid well, but I didn't like it.
When did you decide to take one step further with your education to become a registered nurse anesthetist?
I had 3 children, could get someone to take care of the farm and the 3 children, and I went in what I wanted to do after I got out of nurse's training, be an anesthetist. But the war was there, and he was getting anxious to get married, so I didn't do it. And I said, someday I'm going to be an anesthetist. That day comes, it'll be all right. Yeah, well.
Was your husband okay with that?
I didn't ask him.
Where did you go to school for that?
Hurley Hospital, Flint.
So it was Flint this time around.
Yeah.
Was that what you expected, that training?
Well, I tried to get in Grace, and they wouldn't take you after 35 years of age. And I was 37, so I had to go where they'd take me.
How many years did you have to go?
In those days, it was going to be, and we knew in 6 months, it was going to be 18 months. So I sneaked in on a 12-month program. And pharmacology, I hadn't done it since 1942. And this was, what year was that? When I was 37 instead of 21 anyway. And so pharmacology was kind of hard, and I don't like to study. So I didn't study much, and I figured out what you had to have to pass. So I would get just above that. So one time, the pharmacy guy taught that. Well, I had a younger classmate, 6 months behind me. She said, "You going to study for that test?" And I said, "Yeah, for 15 minutes." She said, "Well, let me study with you, because I'm just behind you in classes." And that little son of a gun made me study and study. I said, "Well, we've got to go to a show." "Nope." She said, "You're going to get this down pat." Well, we had a psych gal that was the head of the training school, and she called me in and she said, "I never thought you were a cheat." And I said, "Now be careful what you call me." She said, "You got a 93. I said, "So what?" She said, "Well, you could have, that makes me mad. You could have done it all along." And she was really ranting and raving, and I said, "Well, rest assured, I'd never get that high again." And I never did, because she was awful. So I got my pharmacology under my...
Well, we're running out of time, and there's so much more to tell. Very quickly, how did your husband get along with the kids during that time while you were going to school?
I guess all right.
Everybody still loved you when you were done, right?
Yeah, I came home every other weekend for about 36 hours or so.
Yeah. When did you do your traveling with your kids?
After
that?
I made some money.
And where did you end up working as a CRNA?
Well, Pontiac General, 27 and a half years.
A long time.
Yeah.
So you saw a lot of changes during that time, didn't you?
Well, yeah.
What year did you retire from there?
85.
1985.
When I was 65.
Was your husband still farming at that time?
Sort of.
And where were you living then?
I had bought a house, well, let's see. I bought a house on a lake. And then I finally sold that about 3 times what I paid for it and went into a condo.
And how many children did you have?
3.
3
Two
children.
girls and a boy.
Any of them nurses?
No.
Any of them in
One's
medicine?
a school teacher. One was a tax assessor, and the boy got the farm.
Boy got the farm.
Yeah. And he has a store on the farm and 2 refrigerated trucks delivering to supermarkets and like
Yeah.
that.
You've lived a good life.
Well, I hope I do a couple more years, but I'm not going to live here.
Very quickly, if you had the opportunity to change something, would you change it?
No, not at all.
Well, thank you very much for being with us.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And thank you for being with us too. We'll see you next time.
Canine Stray Rescue is Oxford's own local dog rescue. Each year they take in hundreds of dogs and bring them into suitable homes. A certified nonprofit organization, Canine Dog Rescue strives to give pound dogs a new leash on life. To donate, adopt, or even volunteer, call them at 248-628-0435 or go to their website dogsaver.org and click on the Canine Stray Rescue League link.